Hello dear friends, you are on the Ruslan Belov channel. Yesterday, Zelensky came out and said that the situation at the front is not at all what it seems, that Ukraine is not retreating anywhere. I wonder, has he looked at the map of Dnipropetrovsk region recently? Well, let's get right into the review of the situation at the front. So friends, over the past day there have been many advances, and these advances are very significant. For example, Russian fighters entered Kostiantynivka. This is the first fairly serious entry into the city. In general, we can say that, as we expected, by mid-September the battles for Kostiantynivka have begun. But let's go in order, and I wanted to start the front review with the situation further north, right here. Once again, there was a serious success recorded in the Serebryansky forest area, and when I say serious, it's not just for the sake of words. The advance is indeed very serious. First of all, let's look at the numbers. The fighters cleared more than 5 square kilometers. At first glance, 5 square kilometers might seem like not much, but we need to understand. It's not 5 square kilometers of fields, it's 5 square kilometers of forest. Those who understand know how huge the difference is, and how much more difficult it is to advance in a forest. But the main importance is not even the figure itself, but in which direction they manage to advance. And they advance toward Yampil. And what is Yampil? Firstly, it's a railway connecting Siversk and Lyman. Secondly, it's a highway also connecting Siversk and Lyman. While the railway hasn't been used for a long time, the highway has been used, and still is, very actively between these towns. And now it is only 7 kilometers away, which means it will be under heavy strikes from FPV drones. Moreover, if we talk about the Serebryansky forests, the Ukrainian armed forces are in complete collapse here. There are videos showing Russian fighters capturing Ukrainian soldiers in groups, literally, without exaggeration, in batches, in these forests. The video shows Russian fighters surrounding a Ukrainian stronghold in the forest and forcing them to surrender. On the footage, about a dozen Ukrainian soldiers lay down their arms and come out with their hands up. Back to Yampil. Now fighting is recorded near the ostrich farm, which is here, specially marked on the map. It's about 1 kilometer away, actually less, about 800 meters from the village. For now, the outcome is unclear, which is why the farm is not marked under Russian control. At the moment, it's a grey zone, awaiting clarification. But everyone already understands what this means. Very soon the battles for Yampil will begin. If the village comes under Russian control, Russian forces will reach the highway, from where they can move directly toward Lyman or directly toward Siversk. That's why when I say this was a very important advance, I am not exaggerating at all. Now let's move further to another, no less serious advance. One more remark about the advance in the Serebryansky forest. If Russian forces physically reach this road from Yampil's side, it would mean that the last major supply artery of Siversk from Slovyansk would be cut. Yes, there's still one more road, but its capacity is much lower, several times lower, and it too will come under drone strikes. Now to the Kostiantynivka sector. A very important event took place here. Russian forces entered the city for the first time with their main forces. When I say entered the city, I mean not just sabotage and reconnaissance groups, which had previously penetrated Kostiantynivka from the Predtekin side, but never secured positions there. Back then, it was premature to say that the city had been entered, but now the situation is completely different. Firstly, the front was consolidated. The pocket between Predtekin and Oleksandro Shultine was fully cleared. Russian forces moved forward and reached the Yagodka gardening community, and that's already part of the city. As you can see on the map, they didn't just enter a single street, but advanced quite deep into this gardening area. Most of it is now under Russian control. Will this have consequences? Of course it will. Now from the Predtekin side, the front will definitely continue to push forward. Today we already received video confirmation that the pocket has come completely under Russian control. Additionally, from this side pressure has begun against the last Ukrainian defensive hub before the city, Ivanopilia. The front here is also catching up and will continue to do so. However, I'll add, I don't think we should expect full-scale urban combat in the classical sense, as in Toretsk or Chasiv Yar. I've explained why in previous reports. Kostiantynivka is a large city with a huge industrial zone. A traditional assault would require colossal resources and drag on for 8 months or more. So yes, the noose is tightening, but the real focus will be on flanking advances and cutting off the main and, essentially, last supply route. Once it is cut, or at least brought under full drone control from both sides, that will be the end. Kostiantynivka will fall without prolonged street fighting. Here too, as you can see, the front is not standing still. Strictly speaking, this is already more the Dobropilya sector, or rather the junction of the Kostiantynivka and Dobropilya directions. Moving north toward Rayske would be counted as the Kostiantynivka-Druzhkivka sector, while moving west is Dobropilya. On this fairly wide 5-kilometer stretch, the zone of control was expanded by 900 meters to 1.5 kilometers in depth. The two targets here are Sofiyivka and Shakove. Sofiyivka is about 2 kilometers away from current positions. Shakov is being bypassed from the north, as it is a very strong defensive hub. Previous attempts to storm Shakov from the direction of Velika Novosilka failed. Now it is being encircled from all sides. Moving on, the Russian army also had success in Dnipropetrovsk region, as has become almost routine. Another village was taken, Novonikolaivka. This makes 12 settlements already under Russian control in Dnipropetrovsk region. Almost every day this number increases. Now fighting is already taking place on the approaches to Berezovy. After Novonikolaivka, the fighting immediately spilled into the neighboring village, Kalinivske. The distance between these two villages is about 1 kilometer, and part of that has already been covered. In general, Dnipropetrovsk region is collapsing for the Ukrainian armed forces much faster than anyone could have imagined just a couple of months ago. And finally, there was also success in Zaporizhzhia region. The area near Stepnohirsk finally moved off dead center. Russian fighters managed to push from the 3rd micro-district and enter the main part of the settlement. Currently, fighting is taking place on Tavricheskaya Street. But we should understand that this settlement is a tough nut, well fortified, so quick results are unlikely. Still, the fact that progress has been made is already good news. Summing up the past 24 hours, 29.5 square kilometers have come under Russian control, a very impressive result. But again, it's important to understand that such results don't just appear out of thin air. It's the product of constant hard work at both the front and the rear. Now let's look at the political stage. Zelensky is trying to convince everyone that everything is fine, that the front is stable and Russian forces are standing still. Why is he lying so blatantly? The reason is that right now he needs to create the maximum illusion of stability to secure funding and support. Against the backdrop of defeats and retreats, it will be very difficult for sponsors and lobbyists to push through financing. Remember how Zelensky lies about mobilization, claiming that there is no coercion, no beatings, no kidnappings, that everyone goes to war voluntarily, whereas in Russia, supposedly, people are herded into wagons at gunpoint and sent straight to the front. That's why he lies about the front situation, and the cartographers from Deep State slow down map updates and conceal the real situation. They keep silent, pressured long ago by the security service of Ukraine, while office workers get paid under the table for staying quiet. Such a tactic will lead to a major collapse somewhere, resulting in the first large-scale encirclement for the Ukrainian armed forces. And then the outcry will begin. But the blame will lie not only on Zelensky and Yermak, but also on all those who cover up their failures and current tactics, throwing everything and everyone into zero for the sake of short-term goals and PR. Meanwhile, Kupiansk will soon fall, and in the southern Donetsk, now Dnipropetrovsk direction, the Ukrainian armed forces have already lost nearly 10-11 villages, while Russian forces show no sign of slowing down. NATO countries have begun exercises to practice the redeployment of troops and equipment to Lithuania. In Kaliningrad, as part of drills, the Russian armed forces also deployed Iskander missile systems directly on the road. Globalists, by the way, have started whipping up artificial hysteria around the Ukrainian crisis. When Ukrainian missiles were flying into Poland, everything was fine. They stayed silent. But now Poland has scrambled fighter jets due to the threat of unmanned aerial vehicles. Lublin Airport is closed. Poland's air defense is on full combat readiness. At this moment in Volyn region, there is an alert because of the threat of drones. We are increasingly convinced that the drones entering Polish airspace were intentional. It was a planned provocation. Now the show for the general public is being played out further. Soon we will understand what the goal was. There are negotiations going on. Could it be that they want to raise the stakes and stage a provocation in the Transnistrian case? By the way, everyone knows the best time for a provocation is on weekends. It's no coincidence that the Russian armed forces moved Iskanders closer and aimed them at NATO countries. Retired Bundeswehr General Roland Carter gave an extremely harsh assessment of the current balance of power in an interview with Welt. According to him, Ukraine has practically lost its ability to resist, while the situation for the Ukrainian armed forces remains critical and continues to worsen. The general stressed that Russia has overwhelming superiority in all areas, from ground forces to aviation, and especially in the use of modern drones, which Ukraine is no longer capable of countering. On the ground, he believes the situation is even more severe. Near Pokrovsk, by his estimate, more than 100,000 Russian troops are concentrated. He admits that Moscow may launch a major offensive before the rainy season begins. If Pokrovsk falls, the situation will change entirely. According to the general, the West is not capable of altering the course of events. There is neither the political will nor the capability to sharply increase arms deliveries, and the defense industry is moving far too slowly. Trump is losing confidence. His influence on Putin is fading. The war in Ukraine continues, and Russian drones are already in Poland, writes Axios. The US president, long used to boasting about his ability to negotiate with leaders, now admits in private circles that his capacity to restrain Putin and Netanyahu is limited. He is frustrated that the war in Ukraine drags on, while in Gaza and around Iran, Netanyahu acts more and more independently. In the case of Israel, the US president is displeased, but does not dare to pressure his ally publicly. Trump's ambitions and reality diverge. He wants to appear as a peacemaker, but more and more often he looks like an observer rather than the director of global events. A Ukrainian MP is panicking. We must be ready for the fact that Putin will strike directly at the Rada. It's only a matter of time. If it gets hit during a session, no one will be able to announce mobilization, extend martial law, or pass laws. Ukraine will become incapacitated, said Ukrainian parliamentarian Kostenko. Meanwhile, drone intrusions into NATO countries continue. In eastern Poland, an air raid alert was declared. Romanian F-16s intercepted a drone in the country's airspace. The fighters tracked it until it disappeared from radar, but did not shoot it down. It was separately noted that the drone posed no threat to the population, since it was far from populated areas. Clearly, Russia is not interested in dragging NATO into the conflict. More and more signs suggest that the real actors are sitting on Bankova Street, the Ukrainian presidential administration, especially after the release of detailed photos of Frankenstein drones that crashed in Poland. In Ukraine, reports emerged of a successful Russian military operation using a gas pipeline during the advance on Kupiansk in Kharkiv region. Along a hidden logistical artery, assault troops moved on special low carts and electric scooters. The route took about 4 days. What advantages did using the gas pipeline provide for infiltrating Kupiansk, and how does this impact the operation to fully liberate the city? Russian forces managed to infiltrate Kupiansk in Kharkiv region through a gas pipeline. Ukrainian telegram channels were the first to report it. There has been no official confirmation from the Russian side yet, but military correspondents also published footage from inside the pipeline. According to the Ukrainian outlet Strana, the Russians built an entire logistical artery, with entrances to the pipeline located near Lyman Pershai. In the footage, soldiers explained that to move through the 4-kilometer-long pipeline, they used low-wheeled platforms, as well as electric scooters, where the height allowed. The route to the outskirts of Kupiansk takes about 4 days, so along the way special rest areas and provisions were prepared, the outlet wrote. It is also reported that Russian fighters are already reaching Radkivka, a village in Kupiansk district, without serious losses, moving south into the controlled forest and dispersing within Kupiansk. Kupiansk lies on the banks of the Oskil River, 85 kilometers in a straight line and 110 kilometers by road from Kharkiv. It is one of the key strongholds of Ukrainian defense in eastern Kharkiv region. In February 2022, the city was liberated by Russian forces, but in September of that same year, it came back under Ukrainian control during the counter-offensive. If Russian troops succeed in liberating the city again, it will allow them to advance further west in this part of the region and potentially link the front with the sector in Vovchansk. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine has already stated that the situation in Kupiansk and its outskirts is allegedly under Ukrainian control. They claim that 3 of the pipelines used by Russian fighters for movement have already been damaged and flooded, while the 4th is under the control of the defense forces. However, the head of the military civil administration of Kharkiv region, Vitaly Ganchev, confirmed that Russian assault groups are indeed in the city. Many did not believe in success. They said Russian flags were carried in by lone suicide squads. But in reality, there is no control by the enemy in these areas. If there were, the Ukrainians would have already shown their flags at those same locations with mocking comments. But that did not happen, wrote Kotz in his Telegram channel. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments, and we'll meet again very soon.